This video is going to go over architectural scale measurement. The first scale that we're going to talk about today is a 1/4 of an inch scale. The scale can be found at the end of your architectural scale. All right, so this is where I'm seeing that 1/4 of an inch right here. The way we go ahead, and I'm going to shift this a little bit because otherwise I'm not going to be able to write. Okay. So the way we would go ahead and represent our scale, if we were writing it out, is we would write 1/4 of an inch equals 1 foot. Okay, so every foot we have using 1/4 of an inch scale, 1/4 of an inch would represent that. All right, so that's what our scale would be if we actually wrote it out. So on our drawings that we will eventually do, for scale, we'll have to identify what scale we're using. If you use 1/4 of an inch equals 1 foot scale, okay, or what we could do is write it out using our architectural units. We could also write it out like that. More times than not, you'll see it written out like that to use that proper architectural scale units. Okay, so the first thing that we need to identify is we have our 0. All right, on this side of our 0, on the left of our 1/4 inch scale, we have a bunch of little tick marks. All right, on the right hand side of our scale, we have a bunch of little lines that are spaced out further apart, and you're going to notice little numbers. All right, do yourself a favor, ignore those little numbers until you understand how to use a scale. Okay, so I'm going to move this up just a little bit so I have a little bit more room to write. So the lines on each side of the 0 represent something. All right, 0 and to the right of our 1/4 inch scale represents our feet. All right, and 0 to the left then represents our inches. Okay. So what we need to go ahead and determine is we have a bunch of different little lines. We need to figure out, okay, how many lines equals a foot? And what we need to do is take a look at our inch section first. So everybody knows, hopefully, that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. Okay, so let's count our little lines. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, so we have 12 lines within our inches section, which means since there's 12 inches in a foot, one line is going to be represented as 1 inch. All right, so we have 12 lines. If you want to do a semicolon, that probably makes a little bit more sense. So 1 line equals 1 inch for our scale for our 1/4 of an inch. Okay. And then we have our feet. Okay, so now we've identified that this right here, these little lines section is 1 foot. So we have to take a look at the spacing within our inch section. All right, so that's our spacing of our inches. All right, which equals 1 foot. So what we can do, so if we mark that down, we can move our 0 to the beginning of our inch. Okay, and then we know our mark isn't here at the first line, but it's at the second line, right there. Okay, and what that tells us is the same distance to jump 2 lines is the same distance as over here, which is a foot. So that tells us that for every foot that we have, we're going to jump 2 lines. So jumping 2 lines here is 1 foot, jumping 2 lines here is 2 feet, Jumping another 2 is 3. Jumping another 2 is 4. So for our feet, we have every 2 lines equals 1 foot. All right, so we know that the 1 line equals 1 inch is important to us. And we know that for every 2 lines equals a foot in our feet section. If you want to organize your notes a little bit differently, that is totally fine. Make sure they make sense to you. But we are going to move on to the 1/8 of an inch next. So the 1/8 of an inch notes, got to readjust here. I apologize. I'm running out of room on my desk. Okay. The 1/8 of an inch, flip my scale. Okay, there we go. Move this down so we can see things a little bit more. So the 1/8 of an inch is going to work the exact same way. All right, we have our 0. We have our little tick marks. Remember, the little tick mark section is where the inches are going to be. And then we have our tick marks that are a little bit bigger. All right, so the bigger tick mark section is always going to be our feet. The smaller little tick mark section here is always going to be our inches. All right, so the way we would express this is 1/8 of an inch equals 1 foot. All right, so that's how we would represent that. Now what we need to do is we need to figure out how many lines we have in our inches section. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so we have 6 lines total. So I'm going to write that over here. In inch section. And again, organize your notes however you'd like. I'm just trying to break it down for us a little bit. Pardon my handwriting. I'm trying to write over the scale. It's not so easy. So we have 6 lines in our inch section, but we have 12 inches in a foot, right? So for every line that we have, for 1 line that we have in our inch section, how do we get 6 to 12? Well, you times it by 2. So every single line that we have here is 2 inches. 2, second line is 4, third line is 6, 8, 10, and then the last one is 12. So for every 1 line, it represents 2 inches. All right. And then we have to take a look at the feet, right? So that's our inch section. Again, if you need to label that inch section, go for it. Again, these are your notes. Make sure they make sense to you. Oops, I'm running out of room here. There we go. Okay. And now what we need to do is we need to figure out how many lines our foot section is. So again, if you can't tell visually, just draw your lines between that inch section and then just move your scale over. And it looks like we only move 1 line. So for every 1 line, I'm going to overlap the camera a little bit. I apologize. For every 1 line we have in the foot section, it's going to be 1 foot. And again, you need to label that. Go for it. Okay. So for every 1 line we have in the foot section, that'll be another line. So as you get more familiar with these numbers will start making a little bit more sense. The bigger numbers are for the scale. So I'm going to move this all the way down to the other end, nice and slow so I don't lose focus. But the bigger numbers towards the 1/8 section actually are from the 1/4 inch scale. All right. So the scales are overlapping each other, which is why you're seeing all kinds of crazy numbers and gaps, because there's scales on opposite ends. All right. And the 1/4 of an inch scale and the 1/8 of an inch scale share a side, because an 1/8 of an inch is half of a 1/4 of an inch. All right, so now we are done with an 1/8 of an inch and a 1/4 of an inch. And notice how they're both on the green side. And now I'm going to flip and rotate because we need the 1/2 inch scale next. So I'm just going to adjust my paper and then find my 1/2 inch scale. And I flipped mine upside down so that I can see the inches and feet a little bit easier. You can do it like that as well. It does not matter. This is my personal preference, is flipping it upside down. Again, it just helps me navigate a little bit with better ease, if you will. You do you, whatever makes sense to you. All right, so our 1/2 inch scale is also on the green side of your scale. The new scales that I ordered are color coordinated to hopefully help us out a little bit more. So 3 of the 4 scales that we're going to go over are on the green side. All right, so our 1/2 inch scale, I'm going to jump down a little bit so I leave myself some note-taking room. Our 1/2 inch equals 1 foot. That's how we would write that scale out for ourselves. Okay, so for our 0 section, remember these are going to be our inches. We got to count how many lines we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And I was lagging a little bit. There are 24 gaps that we have in that inch section. So I'm going to write that down for myself so I don't forget. Okay, so we have 24 gaps. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we only have 12 inches in a foot. So how do we get 24 down to 12? Well, we divide by 2. All right, so every 2 lines, so we got 1, 2, every 2 lines is 1 full inch, which means every single line is 1/2 of an inch. So 1 line equals 1/2 of 1 inch. I also like to write down every 2 lines equals 1 inch. And you can do that as well if you would like to. You do not have to. But these 2 here are in the inch section, if that helps. All right. The foot section's a little bit easier. Move my scale up a little bit because the gaps here are so big that you know that 1 line on the foot side represents 1 foot. All right, so I'm going to write that. I lift my document camera up. Sorry about the glitchiness. So we're going to have 1 line equals 1 foot, and that's the foot section if you're labeling. Okay. Oops, I'm cut off again. There we go. Okay. So that is your 1/2 inch scale. Again, we have 24 gaps here, so every single line is 1/2 of an inch, so 0.5, and every 2 lines that you have is 1 inch. So every 2, I have 1, and then jump over 2, I have 2 inches, another 2 is another 3 inches, 4 is 4 inches, so on and so forth. And then here, we jump 1 big line, 1 big gap, represents that 1 foot. And the last scale that we need to go over is on the yellow side, and we're looking for the 3/8 scale. So I'm going to move my camera one more time. Again, sorry for the craziness going on. Okay, I got to find my scale. So 3/8, again, you know the drill. We're going to be writing down, I'll write the scale down here. Got the 3/8 of an inch equals 1 foot is how we would write that scale out. We got to figure out how many lines there are in our inches section. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 12 gaps or lines in our inch section. So we know that we are back to 1 line equals 1 inch. And then we'll make our little marks to help us out figure how many lines are a foot. And it looks like 1 line equals 1 foot for this scale as well. All right, so those are the 4 scales that we're primarily going to be using in class. All right, we're going to have 4 measurement worksheets that we'll be working on the remainder of the week, and you will need an architectural scale and these notes, or just watching the video, to help you through finishing those up. If you have any questions, come see me. Otherwise, that is all I have for your half, quarter, 3/8, and 1/8 inch scale measurement using an architectural scale.